Hey, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well. Happy November. Yeah, November. That came fast. As always, we'll give a little bit of time for people to join in. Great, great, great to be here. Yeah, so it's November. It has come fast. The past couple weeks have been interesting to say the least in my life. um, Not a bad place to start as we're getting some people in here. I recently finished a contest prep mid October with the Mr. America. And shortly after that, we had my wife gave birth to our third baby girl. Um, yeah, on October 28th. So a week, 2 weeks, maybe that into the off season. And we got all kinds of gains coming in the Licameli household. Um, yeah, so baby came 2 weeks early. I was a little afraid that the baby would come when I was in Atlantic City competing in the Mr. America, but she waited out, which was good. But yeah, still came early, but it was great. My wife is doing well, baby's doing well, and she is growing and growing, and she's a great baby so far. So sleeping and uh, eating and pooping, but it's all good. Very very happy. So yeah, it is going to be an interesting couple of months coming up, but it is all to be expected and very much planned for. So if anyone doesn't know who I am Nick Licameli. I am a doctor of physical therapy. I'm the team's injury reduction and management specialist. I'm also a pro natural bodybuilder and business owner. I have a brick and mortar in person physical therapy office here in New Jersey in the United States. And I also work with 3DMJ. So yeah, this I have this shirt on here. This shirt is I don't know if anyone who competes or has been in a cut. You have two wardrobes. You have one wardrobe for when you're competing and one wardrobe for when you're not. Because 20 to 30 pound difference in your body, you have to wear different clothes sometimes. So this is definitely a contest prep uh, shirt. I got it in 2022, last time I competed, and wore it in Sacramento at the Muscle Mayhem, and fits really great, like real snug in all the right places. I love the V-neck, but once I start gaining some weight in the off season, doesn't quite fit as nice as it did at stage weight. So this is probably the last time I'll be wearing this shirt. So yeah, figured I would wear it during the live and then set it aside for next time I compete. Cool. All right, we got some people in here. Hey, Jay Green. I work with Steve. Awesome. That's great. So Steve is our registered dietitian, and he is part of our holistic approach to this strength and physique sport world. So yeah, Steve is there to help with any dietary concerns and guidance, and I'm here to help with any kind of aches or pains. And of course, the coaches are the coaches. Cool. Yeah, thank you very much. Congrats. I appreciate that. So I guess what this is going to be guided by everyone here, obviously. So what I was thinking was talking about some pain and injuries that I've kind of gone through just to kick it off during contest prep, and maybe there are different ways to manage pain and injury during contest prep or during a cut, a deficit. What are their differences? We'll start there, and then we'll see where the conversation goes. So, as I said, I just finished a competitive season in October. Um, I last competed in 2022 with Jeff as my coach, and I never really took a good off season. Um, and I've taken like a year or two in between, but there was always certain like life circumstances that would make me want to just compete like again and not wait. So, for example, this time I competed again, like I said, 22, and now again 24. I would have liked a bit more of an off season because really it wasn't 2 years, although the years are 2 years apart. But I finished in October of 22 and started prep in February of 24. So it's like a year and a half of not being in a deficit, plus like a few months to get into the right mental recovery, physical recovery out of the 2022 season, jump right back into another prep in 24. The reason was that I knew that we were going to have this new baby. And I wanted another baby and I wanted the kids to be close in age. So I didn't want to wait much longer. I didn't want to wait until 25 because I'd have a newborn baby. 26, I was a little bit too far from 2022. So I said, you know what, let's run a prep. And then after this season, then we'll take a nice off season. I'll have three young kids, a lot of changes with that. So I would have a good off season after this competitive season, and that's the plan. So I'm looking to jump back on stage in 2027. So give myself a lot of time to grow. I weigh about 139 on stage. I'm about 5'7". So I could definitely use a good off season to put on some size and maybe come in the mid 140s next time. Um, uh, but so that was kind of the reason why I prepped this year. And yeah, so some of the aches and pains and injury that I have gone through, I think the most significant was probably this pain on the ball of my foot. And the reason why that happened was, well, I'll describe it first and then I'll go through the process of how I quote unquote treated myself. I noticed I was getting some pain. It felt like I had a rock in my shoe, and I just felt this pain in like the ball of my foot every time I would put weight onto it. I could squat, I could train, no problem. I just couldn't walk on it for some reason. It was really really bad. But initially, it was just there, and then it started getting a little bit worse, a little bit worse. And in prep, the way that Jeff and I have kind of run the past two preps, I don't do formal cardio. I just do step count. So it works well with the cadence of my life, owning the business, having the kids. I would much rather go for a walk with my daughter than leave my house to go walk on a treadmill or jog on a treadmill or something like that. So it works out really nicely for my life to just track step count. Problem is that as prep kind of progresses, step count goes up. And my job as a physical therapist, I'm not behind a desk, so I'm not inactive, but it's a lot of moving from patient to patient and sitting on a stool and rolling a stool and moving from patient to patient and sitting on a stool. So really, my step count at the end of a workday is not much. So I would usually at the end of the day have to really pick up and somehow get these steps in. So I'd work in walks. I would take phone calls and go step outside and go for a walk. Once the kids were asleep, I would go out and start walking around my neighborhood. But sometimes what I would do is I would do like agility drills, so like high knees, running in place, those kind of things, kind of get that step count up. And uh, what happened was I started doing those quite a bit, even sometimes like with just socks on in my house. And the amount of load I was putting into my foot, um, the workload spiked, and the capacity to recover from that did not. So I was in pretty bad shape. I was limping around at work and couldn't walk from my bedroom to my bathroom without significant pain. So went and got an X-ray to make sure I didn't give myself a stress fracture, and everything was fine. X-ray was negative, so ruled out red flags. And then it was just a matter of managing the workload. So talked to Jeff, and what we did was we swapped step count out for a recumbent bike or like a stationary bike. And while that kind of handcuffed me a little bit with the overall functional aspect of my life, I did what I had to do. It was only for a short amount of time. Well, at least I hoped it was going to be. And yeah, so we managed to somehow find like what was even step count versus minutes on the stationary bike, as well as intensity on the stationary bike, speed, a lot of variables that I kind of had to estimate at first. But we found a cadence with the bike that seemed to correlate nicely to my current step count. And my deficit continued, and I continued to progress through prep nicely. And then eventually I just started walking again nice and easily. I changed my footwear at work. That was big too. I used to wear dress shoes all the time. Now I was wearing comfortable shoes, and that did the trick. So the take home from that injury is, so why did it happen? A lot of times you go to a physical therapist or a doctor, an orthopedic, a podiatrist, and they will say things like, "Oh, your arch is collapsing, so we need to put a custom orthotic in your shoe." Or maybe a physical therapist would say, "Oh, well, your hips are weak." So what happens is when you're walking, your foot is doesn't have the support it needs, so you need to strengthen your hips. Could be, oh, core weakness, and that's causing pain in your foot, or it could be weakness in the intrinsic muscles of your foot. That's what's causing the pain. Um, Anything under the sun that you can think of, you could probably hear in a medical professional's office. What I took it as was it was an imbalance between workload and capacity. And so what that is you have this balancing act between workload, so the load that we put into our bodies, and the capacity to recover from that. So workload, things like step count, um, high knees, agility drills, like I was doing, um, training, our volume, intensity, all those kind of things would be in the workload side of things. And capacity is going to be things like sleep, nutrition, hydration, stress management. So we think of capacity like the bucket, and those kind of things like sleep, nutrition, hydration, they are going to either make our bucket bigger or smaller. Workload is like the drops of water we put in the bucket. Sometimes things are drops, sometimes things are garden hoses just squirting in there. So when that bucket overflows, that's when we start feeling things and start having aches and pains. So with my circumstance, what you could imagine is my bucket didn't have time to expand, and I was in a deficit months into a prep. So that's going to limit my bucket's ability to expand because I'm reducing my capacity with being in a deficit. Um, wasn't sleeping because I had at the time a 1 year old, like a 1.5 year old, and a 3 year old. So wasn't sleeping much. And yeah, and my workload of the step count and the high knees, and also without shoes. So I was doing it in socks sometimes. So that was also making my bucket smaller. It was just overflow of water into that bucket and manifested in this significant pain. So the way I treated it was not to get an orthotic, was not to strengthen my hips, not to strengthen my core, not to go realign my chakras, not to foam roll, not to theragun my foot. It was simply activity modification. I did things to make my bucket bigger, change my footwear at work, um, change to the stationary bike instead of walking. All those things are now allowing my bucket to get bigger. And you change what you can. I couldn't change my sleep patterns. I'm a phase of my life. Sleep is not something that I am expecting to get a good 8 to 9 hours a night. So that wasn't able to change. But the things that I could change, I did. And then eventually it just got less and less and less. And I slowly, gradually exposed my foot to walking again. And eventually I was doing, 10 to 12,000 steps a day without any pain. So that's kind of how I approached that particular thing during a prep. So with that story, I'm gonna get into the chat here and we'll see what questions we have. But uh, wanted to just kick it off with that and see if that sparked anything that anyone has been through or anything similar. All right. So Jay Green, I've been increasing weight on the RDL, but last time I felt a lot of pressure on my tailbone. How can I prevent injury? I'm nervous to push it and something happens. All right. Good question. When it comes to these kind of things, you could think of it like a tiered system, right? So we have almost like a pyramid. Hopefully, Eric and Omar don't hear me use that term and I'll be sued because I know that's their term only in the fitness industry. Any kind of triangular shape you cannot use unless you have clearance from their legal team, which I've dealt with in the past. You do not want to deal with the Iron Culture legal team. Uh, yeah, that's a joke. But so this tiered approach, you could think of tier one, so the most important things as volume, weekly volume, um, exercise selection, overall intensity, so RPE, how close to failure we're getting, uh, all those kind of things. Sleep, nutrition, hydration, stress management, that's all tier one. Um, Tier two are things like um, positional changes in exercises. I would put exercise technique in tier one, but more nuanced changes in position and things like that, I would call tier two. Um, and then tier three would be things like the things to calm it down: ice, heat, electric stim, foam rolling, massage, injections, medication, things like that. So they have their place, those things. But if we're trying to figure out, are we going to calm something down or build it up? You want to lean into those calm it down things only as needed. You don't want the whole treatment to be those kind of feel good things because they're usually short term and not where you want most of your time and effort to be for more long term success. So with something like the RDL, like you're talking about, I would first look into your overall frequency and volume throughout the week and month and mesocycle. So is this a new exercise that you're adding in? Did you recently make any changes? Did you increase sets per week? Did you increase the load? Um, how many times a week are you performing the RDL? Where in the week are you performing it? Is it more at the end of the week? Is it right after a leg day? Is it after a back day? Maybe the joints and soft tissues in the area are a bit fatigued from the previous workout, and then you go to do your RDLs, think you're fresh, new day, and perhaps there's some lingering fatigue, localized fatigue, or systemic fatigue for that matter, depending on what you're doing the day prior. Or is that a factor, perhaps? So we didn't even dive into anything with the actual lift yet. We're just trying to figure out if those things can be impacted at all. Then I would dive into the characteristics of the pain. So is this something that is a range of motion thing where you feel great 90% of the exercise, and then at the very bottom you feel a pain in your tailbone? Or is it more, doesn't matter what point, it just hurts when I hip hinge? Two different situations. Perhaps it feels great during your warm-up sets. You can go down full range of motion, come back up, beautiful, feels great. But then as you load the bar, then it gets uh, painful, then now we know it's more of a load kind of thing. So I would just dive into some of the characteristics of the pain, and then that would allow us to make the proper modifications in your program. Always want to rule out red flags, of course. So, is the pain constant? Does it come and go? Is it waking up at nighttime? Is it reproducible? Meaning, like I'm saying before, you can tell when it hurts during the movement or after certain training sessions. But if it's a pain that you really can't nail down, like there's no rhyme or reason why it happens, it comes, goes, really intense, wakes you up at nighttime, numbness tingling down your leg, those are all reasons why you may want to see a healthcare provider. If those things aren't in place, loss of bowel and bladder as well, something very serious if you're noticing any of that, which doesn't seem like you are, because if you were, you probably wouldn't be asking me on a YouTube live about any of those red flags. Um, Also, some kind of accident. If you suffered a big fall or some kind of trauma, car accident, and then you started having this tailbone pain, I'd maybe want to get some imaging done and rule out some kind of fracture or something. So all those things aside, which doesn't seem like you're dealing with, um, we would dive into some of those things that I mentioned. So we could limit the range of motion, see if that helps, limit the load, limit the proximity to failure. But the goal is to only modify as little as we need to. So if we're functioning up here, and this is no pain, hitting the weights and loads you want to hit, making good progress, and then we develop some pain. So rather than jump all the way 9 steps down here with low level exercises like bridges and clamshells and core stabilization, bird dogs, things like that, that would be way down here at the ground level. We want to do just as little as we need. So if it's a matter of reducing the range of motion by 10%, so putting a few plates on the floor and just tapping down at the bottom position and coming back up, and if that feels good, great. Like then all we have to do is go from here to here, and now we're able to ride that out for a week or two, and then as long as we don't have symptoms, and we can slowly integrate it back in. So maybe we do 3 sets um, with the modified range of motion and 1 set without the modification, and see how that feels. And then we 2 sets with the modification and 2 sets without. And we just slowly progress back up to where you want to be. That's kind of the thought process behind it. So, not that it's a prescriptive description of what you should do, but it is the paradigm shift and the thought process behind it of how to manage these kind of things. Hey, Chris, good to see you, man. All right. Right. Long-winded. I train a 5-day split at home. Hey, shout out to home gym goers. On my leg days, I use barbell back squat for my squat pattern. One of these days is more strength based, and the other is a more high rep range. On my strength day, I can perform 100 kg plus for 5 reps, but on my high rep days, I can only do 80 kg for 5 to 6 reps. Gotcha. I find on my second leg day, I get slight lower back pain. Any tips? Both leg days are 3 days apart, Monday and Thursday. Gotcha. Okay. So, Chris, I'm pretty confident that you have a solid setup in your program. I know you've been following us for a long time. You got a good head on your shoulders when it comes to these things. So I'm probably going to say that it's not the programming as far as like too much volume or going failure too much or beyond failure, especially with the barbell squat at home. You don't want to be pushing that too much, or you may not stand up from a squat when you go to sit down. Um, so uh, Not something that's so uncommon, believe it or not, that people tend to have a bit more pain on days that they go lighter for higher reps than lower rep days. And no rhyme or reason, but that's just the way that it behaves sometimes. Perhaps it's just the amount of reps where the body's going into that hip hinge pattern that's triggering it. But what I would say is just modify as little as you have to. So if um, and that's a pretty big weight difference. So um, 100 kg plus for 5 reps, and then all the way to 80 kg, and you're still getting 5 to 6 reps. Feel like wouldn't you get a bit like more repetitions? Is it pain that's stopping you on that higher rep day? Just curious. But a couple different things. What we could do is you could try to swap out the movement after we kind of dive into the characteristics of the pain, right? So is it a range of motion thing? Is it when you hit depth that you're feeling it? Is it when you get to that like 5 to 6 rep range? That's when you start to feel it. So we would figure that out. And if it is a rep range thing, if the load doesn't matter, the range of motion doesn't matter, like all that's great. But once you get to that 5, 6, 7 rep range, you start to feel pain. Then the answer is just stick with that lower rep range, and don't worry about having a higher rep day. If you're still going close to failure and in that rep range, you're still going to get the benefits of strength and hypertrophy. So I would say try that. The other thing we can do is swap out that higher rep squat day for something like a Bulgarian split squat because you said you train at home. Bulgarian split squat is a great way to isolate quads and glutes and kind of burn it out, you know. And you can kind of scratch that higher rep itch with those if you want. You could try heel lift if you're not already. So the strength day, you can not use the lift, get in there with the mindset of I'm going to lift this weight no matter what. Versus on the high rep day, throw a heel lift under your heel, make it more of a higher bar squat, and perform that squat as if you're in a Smith machine. Like just imagine you're in a Smith machine. Just focus on like a piston, like right up and down. Um, Focus on like the quads really burning. So different mindset going into that kind of a squat, which I think you're doing. I think that's kind of what I got from what you said. So you can try that. So you can try making that strength day more of like just a straight up strength. Let's move some weight, and then that second day maybe try a heel lift or change the position of the bar. That may help. You could try a box squat. That sometimes can help too, depending if you're having the pain at the bottom of the range of motion, or swap the squat out for something like a Bulgarian split squat because it could just be a bit too much load on your lower back with two squats during the week. But yeah, those are kind of my thoughts. But let me know if you have any more specific details about your situation. Jay Green, absolutely. Can you ask another question? Different than injury, absolutely. Please do. Chris, good follow up question. Would a lifting belt be useful? Uh, it depends. Um, if it is, then yes. So if it is helpful, then it could be beneficial. If it's not, I wouldn't say that it's a good thing to try because it would help. You know what I mean? Um, it's kind of like a brace. Like if you have elbow pain or wrist pain, and you put on a brace to kind of keep your hand in a neutral position, um, that's great. But it's not something that I would say you need to do unless it helps, right? Or a knee brace, like a knee sleeve, like something you can get at a pharmacy. Just kind of pull that up on your knee. Sometimes it helps people with knee pain if they feel better using it. So I know that that flimsy, little tight sleeve on the knee is not changing the mechanics of the knee at all. That's for sure. But what it is changing is the perception of load going through the leg. So if it helps, then I tell people use it and then use it until you don't need it. But at least it's a tool in the toolbox, right? It's one of those calm it down things, like in that tier three. So the things like massage, ice, heat, medication, braces, and sleeves, and things like that, weight belts, lifting belts. So I would say give it a shot if you have access to one. If it's expensive, I wouldn't go wasting a lot of money on it. But if you could buy it, try it out, and return it if you don't like it, then that's pretty good deal. Yeah, so it may help, but it may not as well. Right. Siraj Rao, Rao. Sorry. Have you seen cases of cervical radiculopathy? Good word. You could tell that I'm a dad of three girls under the age of 5. Ooh, good word. Um, uh, so, have you seen cases of cervical radiculopathy with the only symptoms being interscapular pain? What capacities being trained might help to avoid re injuries, like spine mobility, strength, etc.? Great question. Very thorough. Yes, I have seen that. The radiculopathy going into in between the shoulder blades and not down the arm. Definitely have seen that. Tough to say if it is a true cervical radiculopathy, but I also don't think we need to know that. All we need to know is that we ruled out red flags, which would be, like we said before, constant pain that doesn't respond to anything, no rhyme or reason, can't reproduce it, can't make it better. Lying down doesn't help, ice or heat doesn't help. Um, we can't even reproduce it. It's not like every time I turn this way, every time I turn that way, every time I jump up and down, can't reproduce it, can't relieve it, even in the short term. Constant numbness, tingling, weakness in the hand, or things like that, fever, those kind of things, we want to get checked out. If you don't have those, which I don't think you do, push those aside. And yeah, so basically, all we need to know is what is provoking it and what seems to make it better. It's a good place to start. And then that can help build our treatment after that. So tough to say as far as what to do, whether it's spinal mobility or strengthening. I would say you could try both. So in conjunction with the things we talked about previously, so sleep, nutrition, hydration, workload management, right? All of those things. Once we are paying attention to those, it's great to use things like spine mobility and isolated strengthening to supplement that. So think of spinal mobility and isolated strengthening to that area as creatine or as a multivitamin almost, not even creatine. Like we'll call it like somewhere between creatine and a multivitamin, where yes, it may have some benefit, but you don't want to have that be the only thing that you're trying to do to make yourself healthy. So spinal mobility could be great. One of my favorites for that kind of pain that you're talking about is just putting a foam roller like perpendicular to your spine, hands behind your head, and then exhale on the floor, of course. Exhale back over the roll. Put the roll like chest height, support your head, and then exhale back over the roll. You may get some pops in your upper back, which would probably feel great. Um, And then some strengthening. I wouldn't say you need to do strengthening for that area, as long as you're doing a comprehensive strengthening program that involves shoulders, pulling motions, pushing motions, all that is totally fine. I wouldn't say you need to add in anything specific to that area, but the spinal mobility stuff, it could help. Um, Mostly in the short term, but like we said, in conjunction with that comprehensive program, could be a really nice one-two punch. And if you have any more specifics about that, feel free to continue in the chat. Also, I always forget to mention I work with athletes virtually. So if you do want to dive into anything a bit more specific than we can do on the live, feel free to message me. Um, Instagram, email, on 3DMJ's website, anything that you want, and I would be more than happy to connect. All right, let's see. G Luna. Hey Nick, lately I've been feeling more of an ache and soreness on my lower wrist down to the side of my forearm on preacher curls. Definitely feel it the most during flexion of the wrist. Do you think it's more of a too much weight or just a technique where I might be using my wrist too much? Really great question. Tough to say. It could be either or. It uh, could be too much load, or it could just be maybe you're curling your wrist a bit too much, just as you said. Um, those would be things that I would put in like tier two from the tier kind of example we used before. Tier one, like we keep saying, make sure you got everything, all those boxes checked, right? And if you're following 3DMJ, I'm sure you have most of it, or most boxes checked. Um, so yeah, make sure that we're not doing too much too soon for that area. So one of the things with wrist, hand, elbow pain is we don't want to forget that that's an area that gets workload, so that workload balance, right, load and capacity, that's an area that gets load put at it constantly throughout the day, especially if it's your dominant hand. Um, so that's something to consider too, is lifestyle changes. So one anecdotal example of my own, when my first daughter was born, geez, 5 years ago, I developed some nasty elbow pain on the inside of my elbow. It was so bad I couldn't even open the door, like a refrigerator door. Um, so what I did, I couldn't do pull-ups, couldn't do RDLs, couldn't do bicep curls, dumbbell, nothing. It just hurt so bad. So what I did was I got hooks, like metal hooks, the Velcro and a hook for like grip assistance. I used those for pull-ups because I was training in my basement, so I didn't exactly have a lot of variety. So I was training with the hooks to do pull-ups, hooks with RDLs, modified the curl. I just did some BFR with the curls to lower the load and still get a training effect. And the most important thing, in my opinion, was that I changed things I was doing outside of the gym. The gym is only a couple hours a week, right? But we exist in the world way more than that. So I started being more aware of things that I was using my right hand for, carrying diaper bags, rocking my daughter using this arm, um, opening doors, things like that. Um, I changed those things. I started making 2 and 3 trips to the car and back to the house rather than try to carry everything at once. I would switch arms with my daughter and feed her with the other arm and rock her with the other arm. So that all combined. So the capacity side of things, that bucket, I was paying attention to that with activity modification, wasn't using it quite as much. So putting less drops into that bucket, and then was modifying my training as well. So I was taking load off of that area during my training Also taking less drops out of the bucket, allowing that bucket to get a little bit larger. And Yeah, so long-winded way to say that make sure that you're paying attention to those things, because that area is something that we use often throughout the day. So it's kind of getting this low level load put into it throughout the day. And perhaps, like, if this is like the threshold for feeling pain, maybe your wrist is like slowly creeping up all day, feels fine. But then when you go to train, you're already here, and then you do that preacher curl, and then bang, it kind of goes up over that line and you feel pain. And the poor preacher curl is just like, hey man, like I didn't do anything, I just brought it from like here to here. um, and maybe it's the other things that are causing the pain to kind of build up under the threshold perhaps. But I would say try both of the things that you suggested. I think lowering the load is a great idea. um, and Focusing a bit more on not curling the wrist. You could even let your wrists hang a little bit, like almost an extension, and kind of just curl the weight up like that. You could switch to dumbbells, and maybe don't do a preacher curl. Maybe just do a seated dumbbell curl or a standing dumbbell curl, and see how that feels. Also consider a brace, maybe like a little wrist splint, $8 on Amazon, with just like a hard piece of plastic right here. You could sleep with it, because sometimes when we sleep, we tend to kind of go like this. So that again is like this low level load that's just being put into our tissues without us knowing it. And then we wake up and we're already here from sleeping in that position all night. And then we go throughout our day, open a door, carry some bags, and then next thing you know, bang, like we're over the threshold at the gym. So those are things you consider. You can consider as well. And you want to make sure if you're having any like numbness, tingling in your fingers, that we don't have some kind of like nerve entrapment or carpal tunnel going on there. BFR is another great alternative for that. If it is load and you need to lower the load, consider using blood flow restriction training if you want, because then you can use a lower load and still get the same training effect. If you want any information about BFR, there's a free course in the Vault if you haven't seen it already. Lots of stuff on, I think we did a whole podcast on BFR as well. So, yeah, feel free to dive into those and let me know if you have any questions regarding that. You're welcome, Suraj. No problem. All right. Jay Green. I started a lean bulk last November. I have gained weight, but when I started, I had a bit of excess fat around the midsection. I have not been able to get rid of it yet, but I'm confused because when I see others in the gym, they don't carry extra fat when bulking. So don't why don't have to? Okay, so good question. To me, it seems like it's probably just your genetic predisposition to where you store body fat. So if I'm understanding correctly, so at the beginning of the bulk, you had a bit of that excess fat around the midsection. So even if it's a lean bulk, if you're gonna gain weight, you're gonna gain a bit of body fat along with that. So yeah, I would think that's just where it gets put on for you first, right? And then you said, right, when you see other people in the gym, they don't carry that kind of weight. Maybe they carry it more in their face or more in their shoulders or more in their legs or like their glute area. That's something I have definitely found out is that, I mean, look at Alberto, for example. Look at Alberto in the off season, and he has quad separation in the off season. Um, for me, I have quad separation halfway through a prep. Uh, but in the off season, I have a very defined midsection. You could still see serratus, you could still see my abs. Um, and my face gets not overly full, but my face definitely gets full when I'm in the off season. So that's just genetically where I store fat and where I don't store fat. So my legs and glutes uh, definitely definitely grow in the off season, which makes it difficult. We started this call by saying I have two different wardrobes. Definitely pants change, um, and so when cutting down in the contest prep, I'm always like my legs are like the barometer. I'm like, man, they got to come in a bit more. And once they do come in, I'm like, all right, good. Now I know that we're getting there. But it could be different for you. Maybe you have a bit more of like the Alberto genetic predisposition, where maybe other areas on you are a bit leaner, but you kind of carry it more in the midsection. But I would say there's nothing you can do to change that. It's not something you're doing wrong. I think it's just the way, the order that it goes for you. Right. Siraj, okay, cool. Some follow up details. So the first time I had it, I could identify the volume recovery mismatch. Um, Going balls to the wall, rock climbing in the middle of a strength block with pull ups. But this time around, I couldn't. So what I'm taking from that is you're learning, and that's why, right, the journey of it all, right? That is the goal. The goal is not to be pain free. The goal is to have pain, but know how to manage it and accept pain for what it is, a sensation that we feel like hunger or thirst. And to try to go through life and never feel the sensation of hunger is not feasible, but we're not going to starve to death either. But we manage those feelings with food or with a bit of um, like mental interference, so to speak. Like if your body's feeling hungry, you can tell it, like, yeah, I know we had a late meeting at work and I didn't eat lunch yet. Like, I know, I get it. Like, we're going to eat in an hour. It's okay. So we're not taking away hunger, but we're managing it. And our perspective is shifting about it in that moment. So for you, you went through something and you learned from it and you know, okay, that was a bit too much at that point in my life. So now, this second time around with pain, you already have been through that process, whether you know it or not. You're doing that process in your mind. You're trying things, you're considering different things to change and modify, and you're already light years ahead of where you were in that example that you're talking about. So I'm proud of you for that. That's awesome. Okay, so let's see. I'm gonna see what the follow up is. Um, Could having mediocre sleep, prolonged inactivity predispose any quote unquote safe exercises as well to these types of injuries? For sure. Sleep is one of those things that I think is so individual to people, and I do think that we adapt to sleep. I don't know this, not an area that I'm an expert in. Anecdotally, though, I can say that I feel great. Um, Sometimes running on very little sleep and poor quality sleep. Maybe I'm just so used to it that I don't remember what it's like to get a great night's sleep. Uh, but I am functioning at a pretty high level. Like running a business, running these contest preps in 22 and 24, I can't be that off of my full potential. And I don't use caffeine. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I think people, I just, my body has adapted to that low level of sleep, and I'm kind of able to hang and maintain. There are times that I do auto regulate things, though. If I do wake up and I'm really not feeling well, really bad night's sleep, aches and pains from being woken up at night, headache, then I will make sure I don't push it to failure or past failure at the gym. Take the movements nice and slow. Almost go through the movements, especially the compound movements like squats and RDLs, um, almost like exploring the space. like just kind of like going into the positions, seeing what it feels like. Okay, like sounds good. Like we'll keep going. Every rep could be like my last if it hurts or something, and I'm kind of going down, feeling okay, good. Then I just do that in my warm up sets, and then I kind of get right into training after I know that I'm able to do it. And sometimes on those mornings, believe it or not, I end up hitting PRs, which I have no idea how. So, can sleep affect those things? Yes. To what extent, I don't know. If you're used to 8 or 9 hours of solid sleep and you get 4 hours of interrupted sleep one night, perhaps that's a bit more going to put you at risk of an injury way more than if you're used to sleeping 8 or 9 hours and you get seven, or if you're used to sleeping 5 hours and you get four. Those maybe small changes perhaps aren't going to put you at risk as much, but I don't know. So I don't want anyone to take that as factual. I don't have any evidence behind that. It's more just anecdotal. So we do know that sleep impacts injury risk. There's evidence to support that, but to what extent? Don't I haven't seen anything too like cut and dry guideline wise. And a lot of the studies that I've I've come upon, there is no way um, to standardize or observe someone's ability to adapt to a certain amount of sleep. At least not that I've seen. So I would love to learn more about sleep and how it pertains to injury. But it's so hard because injury is so multifactorial. It's kind of like if eating organic food tends to help lower blood pressure in a study. That's great, but people that buy organic food also are perhaps wealthier or a bit more educated or more likely to join a running club or do yoga and things like that. So there's so many confounding factors to something like that. So there is a relationship between sleep and injury risk. To what extent that is, I don't know. But best bet is to sleep as well as you can. Yeah. And if you do have bad night's sleep and you don't feel great, auto regulate the intensity, the load, all those kind of things. All right. Jay Green, it's almost like the rules don't apply to everyone. What am I missing? LOL. Yeah, I know when it comes to the body fat distribution. I tell you, man, some people, it's just like you look at them backstage or on the stage and you're just like, seriously? like, like you should be not able to compete in a natural bodybuilding show. Like those genetics are not natural. I don't care if there's any uh, steroids or hormones that you're not taking. Uh, that's not natural. Get off the stage and go in a special competition where genetic freaks get to compete and run free. Yeah, man. But all we could do is maximize what we're given and focus on all the great things, right? All the awesome features that your genetics give you. That's all we can do. I mean, right now, anyway, who knows what's in the future with genetic modification and things like that. But yeah, man, sometimes I feel like people got the cheat code, and I didn't get one. Uh, G Luna with the Preacher Curl example. So sounds great. Thank you very much. I've tested going from 50s to 40s, then 45s. I definitely felt it a bit less, so it's possible it was a mixture of both. Um, Mixture of both, too much weight, and so it led to overcompensation. Yeah, that could be right. At a certain load, maybe you're just using that wrist a bit more, and then at the lighter load, perhaps you're not. And sometimes you don't even realize you're doing it. It's just our body's natural compensation. We're going to give it a job to do. It's going to do it. That's what it's been doing for centuries, right? So if you put that load up there, okay, no problem. Like goal is to bring your hand to your shoulder. Got it. And it's just going to do it in any way that it can. So yeah, perhaps that was doing it. But if you could train with 40s and 45s and still take it to the house and get close to failure, beautiful. No need to even go up to the 50s. If they get too easy, the 40s and 45s, do some partial range motion, slow the tempo down, BFR, things like that. If you're really at a hard stopping, can't go over like a 40 or 45, and it just seems too easy, you can always do things like that to make it harder. If, I'm guessing the goal is strength and hypertrophy, right? So we have freedom in that aspect, which is good for situations like this. Okay, let's see. Siraj, I was considering taking out Smith overhead press of my rotation if that's not the case, because I could identify mid set that I got injured. Okay. Yeah. So I've taken out overhead pressing from my program, um, and I have just lateral raises. I have quite a bit of lateral raises in my program, but I used to have overhead presses in there, right up there with like squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press. It was just part of my compound movements, and I've done all kinds of overhead pressing throughout my career, and dumbbell overhead pressing became painful, and I was getting this pain in my left shoulder, like sharp, sharp pain. I would say this was almost, geez, maybe 10 years ago, maybe like no less than 10 years, probably like my mid to late 20s. So I would just modify as needed. I was not able to do a seated overhead press with dumbbells unless I had a back support. For some reason, pushing back into the chair made things feel better. So I bought myself a few years an overhead press with a back pad like that. Then that didn't feel great. So then I went to a landmine press, and I was doing landmine presses for quite a while, and I loved them. They were great. And then back when I was mentioning my daughter was born and I started training at home, I was doing landmine presses with bars stuck in the corner of the room. Um, but as I developed that elbow pain and kind of like shoulder pain as well, I had to decrease the load I was putting on it, right? So I had to allow that bucket to get bigger, stop putting water in it, and I took out overhead pressing. That was when I was working with Jeff as well. I just started working with Jeff in 22, and he gave me the I guess the approval, because I was, believe it or not, like as silly as it sounds, like you get nervous when you take out something that was a staple for so long in your training. So we took it out, and I added in some more volume of lateral raises, and my shoulders actually made some decent progress even with taking it out. So if you want to take out the overhead press, I'm not saying you have to, but don't feel like you're going to leave your gains at the table. Lateral raises, face pulls are great for shoulders, upright rows, um, reverse flies if you have a machine to do it. All those are excellent for shoulder growth and health too. Frederick Larson. I started my first prep 2 weeks ago. Nice job, man. Congratulations. Um, I have about 6 months to lose around 17 kgs, so about zero point 0.6 kg a week. What approach would you recommend? Thinking about the rate of loss, diet breaks, etc. Uh, that's a good one. It's gonna depend. It's gonna depend on a lot of different things. It's your first prep, so I think you're giving yourself 6 months, right? That's enough time, I think. Um, I'm wondering if you had like a pre-prep phase, like prep before the prep. That would have been great too if you did. But yeah, usually half a kg, like a pound per week, is what you can kind of shoot for. But it's going to depend, because bodybuilding is not a weight loss competition. So you're gonna spend, not maybe not in the beginning, but toward the end of it, or the midway at least, you're gonna want to make sure that you're not just losing for the sake of losing weight. You want to make sure that you're not losing muscle and you're maintaining that balance between size and conditioning. So it's easy without a coach's eye just to diet, half a kg, half a kg, half a kg per week. And you get to the end of the prep and you hit an arbitrary weight goal and you realize that you lost a lot of your fullness and your size. And sometimes you don't want to lose, you want to maintain sometimes, right? If you're cruising and things are looking good, maybe you want to pull back on some of that a little bit and throw in a diet break, right? If you're looking too flat, that's something that Jeff and I have done. um, my One of my issues is just dieting too hard in the past, so Jeff has had to pull me back. I'm not a great person to say when I need a diet break or when I'm feeling it, because I kind of just do it. Like I don't really, I just kind of do it. And I just, okay, the goal is to hit these macros and this step count. Like, cool, like let's keep rolling. Go, go, go. So sometimes Jeff has to look at me and watch my posing and say, you know what, Nick, like I know we're losing weight, but we're getting a little bit too flat. So why don't we pull back a little bit, take our foot off the gas, take a diet break for a week, eat at maintenance calories, and then we'll reconvene after that. And believe it or not, sometimes you even continue to lose weight during a diet break. So my answer, as far as like how you should approach it, tough to say, really tough to say. That's where a coach would come in to kind of have that eye to let you know if we should hit the gas or pull back and add in something like a diet break or a refeed. But congrats on diving into your first prep. That's awesome. So 6 months. It's November, December, January, February, March, April, May. All right, cool. So you're gonna be dieting through the holidays, huh? All right. I will say, if you are gonna diet through the holidays, um, it's just bodybuilding. No one ever, if you're competing in May and you want to have some food with your family in December or January, you're not going to get fourth place instead of first place because of the food you had in December. Let's be honest and understand that the most important thing in life is to enjoy time with loved ones, right? So don't let this prep derail you and don't bring tilapia or grilled chicken to a family party. Now, if you were competing in January, different story. If you were competing in February, different story. You got time. You're competing in May. So don't stress out around the holidays. If you even celebrate the holidays, I don't know where in the world you are or what you celebrate, but even not the holidays, birthdays, social gatherings, make sure that you understand that it's just bodybuilding, right? But yeah, if you're following 3DMJ, I'm sure you know that. All right. Uh, okay, Lionel Martinez. Any idea why I feel more muscle connection on one tricep and not the other? For example, on tricep extension with the cable, I feel nothing on my right tricep. Interesting. Not the first time I've heard that, and I felt some of that like on my own throughout my kind of training career. Uh, as far as the reason why, I don't know. Uh, in a red flag scenario, it's some kind of like nerve issue, which isn't the case here because your complaint wouldn't be I don't feel my tricep during a tricep extension. Your complaint would be when I look at my arm, I don't see my tricep. It's just atrophied and is way smaller than my other side, and I can't push myself up on a chair and scoot over using that side because I can't activate my tricep. That is a scenario when there's probably some kind of nerve injury, which would be a red flag, and we should go see a doctor. For you, not the case. I think it just happens sometimes. We're asymmetrical. One side feels different than another sometimes. What I would suggest is try different exercises. Um, if a cable extension makes you feel that way, maybe try a single arm cable extension. So you're really just focusing on that on that tricep when you're working that side. Um, Consider changing the position of your upper arm. So maybe like an overhead extension where you're really getting a nice stretch at the bottom and then coming up. Maybe some lengthened partials that can just kind of like wake that tricep up and you may feel it a bit more. BFR is another great way to do that, to really feel the burn in your tricep. So you could try those things, but yeah, I think people are just asymmetrical sometimes. Um, yeah. Unless so another question I would ask is it new? Like were you always able to feel both sides and then you notice like pain in your shoulder, pain in your neck, pain in your arm, and then all of a sudden you couldn't feel that side quite as much. So was it like a sudden thing that you noticed, or has it kind of been a thing that you've always known about yourself? That you've kind of just always like managed and wished you could feel that side a little bit better. All right, let's see. All right. Cool. Suraj, I'm clearly still learning as evidenced by not cleaning up my physical inactivity. Um, yeah, that sounds super tricky to isolate sleep as a variable. Yep. Um, Feeling very optimistic about my situation now, Nick. Thanks. It's awesome. Glad I could help in this kind of communication. So that's awesome. Very happy. If you have any other questions, obviously reach out, and I'm more than happy to continue the conversation. Okay, G Luna, another question. Lately, I haven't felt much DOM, so muscle soreness, at all. Just slight soreness from the muscles I hit, never enough to stop me from training again. In cases like this, what's a better barometer for if I'm overreaching? Should it just be performance based, where if I can't match my log from earlier in the week, it might be too much? Uh, Cause from a mental and physical perspective, I can train. Yeah, it's a great question. I think you hit the nail on the head. I would just say if you're noticing your lifts are getting weaker, if you're not noticing progress, those are all ways to kind of see, am I overreaching? Um, is Another way would be like overall just systemic fatigue. So not localized soreness, but are you noticing like headaches and like you're just not feeling rested? Um, Sleep is impacted. You're just not getting good sleep. Those kind of things may be indicators that you're maybe overreaching a bit. If it's hard to gauge, you can always just throw in scheduled deloads, and then that can kind of check that box where you know you're probably not overreaching if you have strategically scheduled deloads in there. Um, but but yeah, you may just be adequately recovering, which is great. Yeah. Frederick, I did do a pre-prep. I'm currently under 15% body fat. Nice. And I do also have a coach. Beautiful. Nice job. You got all your boxes checked, man. That's great. More than I can say for my first couple seasons. Was wondering what your approach would be. We plan a diet break over Christmas, New Year's. Beautiful. So I'll be able to enjoy the holidays. Nice. Yeah, I would say about, like you said, like half a kg per week for the beginning, and then see where we're at, see how you're looking. Just kind of rinse and repeat, change as little as you need to. So start with just a bit below maintenance, and then naturally occurring steps, and see how long that first change will take us with some progress. And just mostly just not changing anything, just letting time do its thing. If you don't lose weight one week, ride it out another week and just see. And then slowly take out some calories usually from carbs and fats. But again, that's going to depend on everyone is going to be different. And then slowly bump steps up, but very gradual because you don't want to burn yourself out and not have anything to pull from too early. So just a gradual decrease in calories, increase in the step count. Unless you're doing formal cardio, then do what you do with whatever your coach is recommending. But that's what I did, man. I just slowly dropped calories, slowly increased step count. And to be honest with you, from February to October, maybe Jeff and I changed something 3 times. Is really anticlimactic, unsexy, and just like let time do its thing. So yeah, don't think that has to be rocket science. Stick to the basics and just let time do its thing. Be very patient. But you're doing so many things right, so nice job. All right. If I've been permacutting basically off and on for 2 to 3 years, I went from 192 to 156 at 5'8". Nice. I'm closer to 18% body fat. Would a main gaining approach for a year be a good idea? I've never bulked or main gained. Is there a lot more muscle growth potential for me? Tough to say. It depends what your goal is. If your goal is to step on stage by a certain time, certain year, that's going to change the trajectory of whether we're going to gain or lose and at what rate. If the goal is just to get as big and lean as possible, uh, then we don't, and there's no time frame. Beautiful. Then we can take as much time as we need, and you can run every experiment that you want. So it's really tough to say, but the cool thing is we can always just run the experiment and see, and then we'll get more data for the future. So either one of those is fine. So the fact that we went from 192 to 156, that's really impressive. Um, if you're feeling burnt out, if you're feeling like you're done dieting, like that's a huge weight loss. So if you're like, you know what, like I'm really happy with how far I've come. I just can't imagine dieting anymore. If that's the case, then yeah, man, I think taking a little bit of a break to stay at like maintenance a little bit would be a great idea. And even giving yourself some grace, like if there is going to be some weight gain during that period, totally fine. Like as long as you're hovering within like plus or minus 5 or 10 pounds, like if you need the mental break, like that's fine. Believe me, you're not going to go back up to 192 just by main gaining and giving yourself some grace and like a little bit of a control alt delete and refresher, um, mentally and physically. But if you're cool, if you're like, man, I'm addicted, like this is great, I'm losing weight and my life is changing. I'm noticing things. I'm not getting out of breath on the stairs or whatever, and you still want to get leaner, then I think you could keep going down. Um, but as far as like muscle growth potential, tough to say. There's so many things that get put into that age, how long you've been training, you know, those kind of things, nutrition, obviously. But yeah, that's awesome. And congratulations on losing that weight, man. Keep it going. Siraj, have you observed the muscle memory phenomenon in patients with atrophied muscles, secondary to nerve damage after recovery? Yes, absolutely. Uh, Nerve damage specifically less frequently. Not that they don't gain their muscle back. I just see that less frequently in my office. But after surgery, so knee replacements, ACL replacements, ACL reconstructions, rotator cuff, those kind of things where we see atrophy of like biceps, triceps, and forearm, quad atrophy during an ACL or a total knee replacement, or even the gastroc, the calf can get quite atrophied. 100%. Once those people start putting weight on that leg again, doing some BFR, loading it, yeah, man, it comes right back, which is really cool to see. There's, I think it's on the our YouTube channel. So if you type in the quarantine comeback, I have, I think, a 5-part video series on returning to training after a layoff. So it was done during the pandemic. As gyms were opening up, I wanted to make a resource to for people as they're getting back into the gym. So the last thing I wanted was everyone to be so happy that their gym was opened up again, go back into the gym with all the fire in the world, and then hurt themselves. So I made that series on YouTube if you want to check it out. It touches on all those things. Luciano, hey man, currently treating shoulder and glute injuries after my first WNBF competition, using lots of your advice. Thanks a lot. Oh man, that's awesome. That's so great to hear. I'm glad that I could help, and congrats on your first WNBF competition. Um, yeah, it's really cool, man. Where was it, and how did it go? Not, I don't care what place you got. I want to know your experience. Did you like it? Um, uh, but yeah, cool. Okay, Luciano, can you please explain to me how you guys like to count volume per muscle group? Trying to find out my new workout specifically to get better V taper for men's physique. When it comes to a V taper, a lot of it is mom and dad and the genetics that you're given. Um, with that said, uh, a comprehensive strengthening and hypertrophy program is going to be your best bet. I don't know that there are workout routines to improve a V taper, because you're still going to, obviously, it's shoulders, narrow waist, and nice quad sweep. A narrow waist is just going to be conditioning and genetics. Shoulder width is much less to do with muscle on your shoulders and more to do with clavicles, so your collarbones, which we can't control. And your quads, to focus on an outer quad sweep, like with different exercise selections, you're probably better off just training your quads through a full range of motion with good technique. Um, so that said, the original question was, how do we measure volume? Um, and it doesn't really matter how you measure volume as long as it's consistent, unless you want to compare yourself to something maybe you read in a study or a meta-analysis or something. If that's the case, and you want to make sure that you're measuring it the same way they did in the study. But if you have a system in your mind where you only count isolation exercises for volume for a certain muscle group, that's fine. As long as you're consistent week to week, month to month, year to year, you'll be able to increase and decrease volume appropriately. Or if you want to call a bench press and a tricep extension, if you want to count that as tricep volume, that's fine. But you want to just keep it consistent. That's the most important thing. Yeah. And as far as like the right amount of volume, that's going to be individual to everyone. Cool. All right. Well, wow, it's been an hour and 20 minutes. Um, these are awesome questions. I love the engagement. Love talking about this stuff. Once again, I am available for virtual um, treatment. I work with athletes all the time. And yeah, just feel free to reach out through Instagram, through 3DMJ's website. Um, Anything you need, I'd be more than happy to help. And of course, we're going to say goodbye to this shirt because I am about 8 pounds above stage weight and it's already feeling a little bit tight. So this is going to go into the back of the drawer, and it's time to gain some weight and gain some size, and most importantly, be present for my family and my new little baby girl. So it's been awesome. Thank you, everybody, for coming in and being engaged in the conversation. and I will see you all real soon. All right. Take care, everybody.